We've been talking about the flood and all sorts of things here. And as I was saying earlier, we do not know how long Adam lived on this earth, because time, and when we measure time, I know we never think about this, but we usually measure time for us, we humans, and even for animals, by birth and death. And Adam was created to be an eternal being. And while we know there was some sort of day and night on the earth, we don't know how it worked and what it was. From the Bible, I think we see that the earth was surrounded by a large canopy of water vapor and maybe even water liquid that God had put there. And the earth's climate was what everybody's dreading today. I remember Rush saying it, going, yes. I thought everybody wanted it warmer. I mean, if it's warm and there's not winters in Minnesota, the mosquitoes will kill you. But and the same in Massachusetts, wouldn't it? They're going to stick their beak all the way through your body. If it's getting warmer, it could be going back. I don't think this is true, but I believe that the earth at one time was very tropical, if you want to put it that way. And the time, we don't know. Adam's life, I think, would have been measured. Remember, on the day you eat of it, you'll die. But he didn't. He didn't physically die. But at least at that point, his life began to be measured. Now, this is when you begin to die, and now you died. Now, I don't know if I'm right in that. I just thought about it at different times. And so some of these ancient earth things may well be right. Because we have God, and let's go back to Genesis chapter 7. And I think we kind of stopped at verse 18. The water prevailed, increased greatly upon the earth. The water floated, the ark floated on the surface of the water, and prevailed, so the high mountains were covered. 15 cubits higher, the mountains were covered. All flesh that moved on the earth died. All that was on the dry land, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life, the spirit of life, died. Thus he blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky. They were blotted out from the earth, and only Noah was left together with those who were with him in the ark. Water prevailed on the earth 150 days. Wow. We go on, and chapter 8 talks about the famous stuff with the floods subsiding, and he sends out the dove, then he sends out the raven, and it came about that they eventually landed. And verse 15 of chapter 8 is where we'll pick up. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh, and that is with you, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, his sons and wives, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by their families from the ark. Then Noah built an altar to Yahweh. And here we go. Took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt sacrifices on the altar. Yahweh smelled the soothing aroma. Yahweh said to himself, Listen to this, I will never again curse the ground on account of man. Why? Because the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. while earth remains, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Now this is fascinating. He doesn't say, I've done this a bunch, but it almost sounds like it. I will never again. I will never again. He goes on, Noah blesses Noah, the fear and terror of you will be on every beast. Every moving thing alive shall be food for you. Verse 4 in chapter 9, you'll not eat flesh with its blood. I will require the lifeblood of every beast. He talks about capital punishment. And verse 8, God spoke to Noah and said to his sons, saying, now, behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you, with your descendants. Every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast, all these things come out of the earth, every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood. Listen to the way it says it. This is just interesting. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood. Neither shall be again a flood to destroy the earth. And it just sort of sounds like he's saying, I've done this before, but I'm not going to do it again. And so my covenant with you, Noah, is that it's going to happen. And here we see him talking about the seasons and all these different things. It's going to remain that way. But the way he says it is just interesting that we do not know if he had done this other times. Anyway, he says, the sign of the covenant I'm making between me and you and every living creature is with you for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud. It shall be for a sign of covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about that when I bring cloud over the earth, the bow will be seen in the cloud. I'll remember my covenant, which is between me and you, every living creature of all flesh. Never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. And he talks about the rainbow being the sign of the covenant. And that's all I wanted to get to at this time. It goes into other more decadent things later on. But the point is that here we have the flood, and the two things that 2 Peter says that mankind will say never happened was creation by God and the great flood. But the reason that we're looking at this is to actually take us into the covenant that he made with Noah, and then we're going to go chapter 10 is a beatitudes. How many people were begat here and there, and look in verse 32 of chapter 10. These are the families of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies, by their nations. Out of these nations were separated on the earth after the flood. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. They used brick for stone. They used tar for mortar. They said, come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into the heaven, make for ourselves a name. Otherwise, we'll be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. It's fascinating stuff. Yahweh came down to see the city and the tower, and then he said, the people are one. They all have the same language. This is what they've begun to do. Now nothing will be impossible to them. Nothing will be, now that's just God saying nothing will be impossible to them. 7, let us go down, confuse the language. They will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the whole earth. They stopped building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth. He scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. And we see the thing is in this that God did an odd thing. and we think it's odd. But he said, Abram and his descendants, that's going to be the people that I'm going to look at the closest. These are the ones that I'm going to spread the truth of Yahweh, God, to the earth. Now, when we look in the universal language and Babel and all this stuff, what we see is, I'm trying to find it now, I've lost it. Sorry, should have been more prepared for that spot of it. But Yahweh picks the Jews. Now, what's interesting is that him picking the Jews there, Abram, and that's the people that's going to be the Jews. But the other peoples were scattered abroad, and they were scattered abroad by an interesting, there's a statement, I'm not finding it now, but it says, the others were divided up according to the number of the sons of Israel. This in Psalms? Thank you. We're at? Okay. It's in Psalms. And, okay, John is looking here, but yeah, find it. But the thing is that it's stunning. When this division happened, there were not the tribes of Israel. And yet he divided them up according to the number of basically the working unit. But they had that working unit was not there yet. But God divided the people up that way. Now, I bring this up only so that we can understand that what we're about to talk about in Jude and Peter. Because no one ever talked to me about this stuff. Yet it's in the Scripture. And what we see in Scripture, and it doesn't make any sense, but at the Tower of Babel, he divides these people up, and he takes one group. The rest of those people, whether we like it or not, and you go, this doesn't fit my theology, the rest of those people were divided up. They went out through other areas of the whole earth, and we know that they scattered out from into these areas, and they're able to follow that in a lot of ways. But the point that I'm making is that there's something we don't think about, and that is there are not just good angels. They're bad angels. Now, over and over, people will teach you that demons are fallen angels. And I don't believe that. When I looked and found some of this stuff, we're going to have to go back further in Genesis, back to chapter 6. We find that the Bible actually talks fairly frequently about what we're going to be saying here. We'll call it powers, principalities, rulers, authorities. And it's not talking about authorities on earth. We're going to talk about some of these where it speaks of this, but what the reason that God destroyed the earth is because there was so much wickedness in it. And let's go back now to Genesis chapter 6. Because remember, the reason we talked about that was we're about to see it, I'm sorry. We start in chapter 6, verse 1, please. Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, daughters were born to them. that the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Okay, now we need to stop. We have here the Bible saying that the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. What's sons of God? And the only way that we see this phrase used is to describe angels. And we know that there was rebellion against God by angels. Some people think it's in the future. I don't believe that at all. I think the Bible talks about it as something in the past. And what we see is when he's talking about the sons of God, that this phrase is used to mean angels. And this whole thing gets very strange really quickly because as I was doing the research, I suddenly realized, as we're going on to read this, let's go back to chapter 6, verse 3. Then Yahweh said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he is also his flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards." Now, I'm going to bring up the word the afterwards thing. We don't know why. But the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Men of renown doesn't mean that they're necessarily positive, okay? When the Nephilim when we look in Scripture, were the product of a human female and a male angel. And I know we go, oh, that's not right. Well, guess what? It's not. These angels did the thing that it says and that we've read earlier today, that they abandoned their proper abode. They went after strange flesh. It wasn't the same creature that they are. And God is, when he's about to bring on this flood, and he's in chapter 6, we've already looked at it, verse 3. "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he's also his flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. And then he speaks about the Nephilim. Verse 5, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. The Lord was sorry he made man on earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And he said, I will blot out man, whom I have created, from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things, to birds of the sky, for I'm sorry that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh." Now, I want you to skip down to verse 11. "Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God." Wow. "And the earth was filled with violence." Filled with it. He says mankind's only desire and the only thoughts they have are wickedness. Look into verse 5. "The thoughts of his heart were only evil continuously." These people and what went on with them, I think we can't fully appreciate. And if you think about people with mental illness, they cannot control their minds. Their mind, it may be demonic, but their mind doesn't control itself anymore. They cannot think things they want to think. They've lost, when they say, "I'm losing my mind," that entails, the reason it says that is because this person is losing the ability to control his mind. You and I This is scary, so this is close. You and I will let our minds drift into all sorts of stuff. And we'll go, nobody sees, nobody cares. I'm just going to think about these things that are evil. And there's an issue, of course, is that every time that you think these thoughts, that is an area in your soul that's given over to the darkness, over to Satan. You're loving sin more than God. And in doing that, you allow your mind more and more to have these sensual thoughts, and we think that that's a perfect innocent thing. But when you're thinking these sensual thoughts, it's interesting, what you're doing is being irresponsible. Okay, what you're doing is going, I have the right to think what I want to think. And I'll think this, and I'll think that. And we'll play like different things happen in our minds, and we imagine these things. We use our imaginations for the evil. And no one here has ever lost their mind that I know of. But what happens is the mind eventually, you lose control over it. It's the same thing with people and drugs. They think, oh, I can handle this. And then they find, I can't control it. The drug controls them. And our thoughts control them. And our thoughts eventually are controlled by something that's not me anymore. I personally think this is one of the places where the enemy comes in and gets ground in our lives, is from our thought life not being what it's supposed to be. And the earth, we look in this, verse 11, was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth filled with violence. God looked on the earth. Behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. Now stop a second. Everything is evil. Everything. Mankind is just evil. That's all, continually only on evil. I don't think we can imagine it. Our country is getting that way. The world is getting that way. It's completely lawless. To an unbelievable amount. Things that you wouldn't think. The perversion of sexual acts now is this is something you are required to embrace. You're required to embrace it. If you don't, you lose the job. This is happening. People are losing jobs. They can't go to school. All sorts of different things because they're not going along fully with the doctrine of the homosexuality things, or of the people that are saying, well, I feel like I'm a woman today, the transvestites. And but they're requiring it. Wait a second, how can you do that? How can you do that to your body? And it's corrupt. That's a good word for it. It's corrupted. When you're doing an experiment in science, you must do everything in the lab to make sure that whatever your sample is not corrupted. Now, by corrupt, we mean that we are, let's say we're looking at what the causes of some disease in a smoker's life. Well, you're going to have a group of people to compare it to the smokers. But what if the smokers, and you don't find out this till afterwards, but are not only smoking cigarettes, but drinking hard liquor and eating big wads of chocolate every day. And you do not take that into account. And the person all these people have cancer, and you go, oh, it's cigarettes. Now, trust me, it is cigarettes. But if these people also, the sample was corrupted by something else going along that you didn't take care of, you didn't recognize. Now, what we're looking for here is, and what we're seeing, is that the earth was corrupt. Mankind was corrupted. How? No longer was the genetic what am I looking for? The genetic code was not the genetic code of man. Okay? It was the genetic code of people full of iniquity, full of evil, and one of the reasons for it was the Nephilim. God, I personally believe, as do a lot of people, they believe that this was an attempt by Satan to destroy man, make him to be corrupt, and God's just going to be stuck. And he, again, has this flood, and again, I think personally that when we look at the angels that have been thrown into Tartarus, it is almost like, when you read these things, it didn't fully say it, but it's almost like these angels, the watchers, I believe they're called in Enoch, that they went into these women and put their genetic code into mankind's genetic code. If you look at the lineage of Yeshua, you find all sorts of sin, all sorts of weird things that people that should have known better they got into. And I personally believe this was a continuation of these angels, which we're going to talk about in a great deal of detail. These angels that went in to mankind and to womankind, maybe I should say it this way. Now, this is another thing that when I say it's almost like there were other floods, because I personally believe, and this is just my belief, because it just sounds interesting that the way that it's said almost sounds like there were other floods. I'm not going to do that again. Okay, I'm through with that. I'm not going to do that again. And God has wiped out everybody on the face of the earth. And it's almost like he did it other times. And I personally believe that that happened, that there were other floods. And I personally believe also that eventually these angels, which we've read about in 2 Peter and in Jude, God took them, he had warned them, if you don't stop this taking of your genetic code into man's genetic code, you take it, and I believe they didn't stop it. And we have hints of that, pretty strong hints, in the book of Enoch. I know it's not biblical, but there's some things that the church, early church, a lot of people believed that it was significant. Why? We see it being quoted in 2 Peter and Jude. And that these angels had, every time God would get started again, they would go in. And they would go in and they would mess up the genetic code. And I personally believe that what happened is that God said, that's enough. You're not doing that anymore. And he took them and bound them in perpetual chains and put them in Tartarus, waiting for further judgment to come upon them. And we're going to kind of tie this together and begin to understand what Peter and Jude are saying and why they're saying things like these people revile angelic majesties, and understanding who these angelic majesties are and why someone would, because wait a second, this person is a believer in God, why is he reviling an angelic majesty? We will talk about that.